If your wife went out the door at 10 p.m., would you be concerned? I'm not, because I can simply turn on the local news to see her. My wife, Mandy White, co-anchors the evening news for one of Pittsburgh's top stations. Smart, beautiful, and has a charm that lights up the screen. Mandy is already well known locally, and many believe she is destined for a bigger market, perhaps even Dallas or Los Angeles. There is even rumors of a possible offer in New York. The ultimate goal for anchors I'm Elliot Foster, and Mandy preserved her maiden name for her professional career, as many anchors do, is to keep a clear separation between their on-air persona and their personal life. I consider myself extremely fortunate to be her husband, and I realize that every day. We met during his freshman year at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. She was studying radio while I was deep into marketing. I first saw her at a fraternity party. She was tall, blonde, and attractive. However, I was never a model or an athlete. I was outgoing, and to my surprise, we connected. We dated steadily, with a few hiccups along the road, and even split up for 2 weeks. I recall sprinting across campus to win her back, only to see or run into me. It felt like something out of a movie. By our senior year, we were passionately in love, engaged, and living together off campus. But we postponed the wedding until after graduation, so she could have the grandiose celebration her family desired. We married only a week after graduation in a modest chapel on campus. Mandy secured a weekend weather anchor position in Augusta. It wasn't a big job, but it was her first step into the industry. Meanwhile, I founded a modest advertising agency to gather experience. Mandy's career accelerated within a year. She was offered a reporting position at a prominent station in Columbia. We moved there, and I was employed by a major advertising business. Mandy thrived, eventually progressing to a weekend anchor role and then a full-time co-anchor spot for the evening news. Her pregnancy announcement increased her popularity, and when our daughter Emma was born, it was nearly a community celebration. The network even aired a short series about Mandy's transition to parenthood, for which she eventually received a regional Emmy. Eventually, she was awarded a co-anchor position at Pittsburgh's #1 news station, KCRW, which we knew would lead to even more opportunities. The transition from Columbia to Pittsburgh was smooth. I was content with my job and enjoyed our life in the South, but with the help of co-workers in the station, I was able to secure a position at a major ad firm in Pittsburgh. The station's management even linked us with a top-tier realtor who assisted us in finding a lovely property near Greenfield, as well as an excellent daycare for Emma. Surprisingly, we adapted to our new life more quickly than planned. Our daily schedule isn't average. I get up early, cook breakfast, and go for work, leaving Mandy and Emma fast sleeping. Mandy spends the morning with Emma before leaving her off at Mrs. Hanley's, a beautiful woman who runs a tiny daycare that educates children to the fundamental principles they will discover in kindergarten. I pick up Emma after work, handle supper, bath time, and bedtime books before finally relaxing on the couch. Mandy's schedule, however, is exhausting. She arrives at the station by 3 p.m., preparing for the evening broadcast at 6 p.m., and again at 10 p.m. Her supervisor, Jason Fields, has just started holding meetings after the Late Show to critique the show, which means she gets home even later. Pittsburgh's media market is highly competitive, and I understand why ratings are so important. But as her spouse, I miss our times together. We both work long hours, and at times it feels like we're more like pleasant roommates than married couples. We try to set aside weekends for family time, but with Mandy's public performances, our schedules rarely coincide. I know it's difficult on her, too. Whenever I bring it up, she avoids the topic. It's complicated. We discussed these concerns before we married, and I vowed to support her profession, especially since so many of our friends work demanding jobs. Nonetheless, the frustration gradually mounted over lunch one day. I ended up confiding in my friend Bill Corbin, my agency's media director. Bill is a family man with a daughter who is little older than Emma, and we've gotten close over time as we chatted about life and family. I immediately found myself saying, "Man, I wish I had what you have." Bill glanced at me with concern. "Things rocky, Elliot. Before I knew it, I had spilled everything. I am married to one of the most remarkable women in the news field. I confess it, but I rarely see her. Her admirers undoubtedly see her more frequently than I do." Bill shook his head sympathetically. "That's tough, Elliot. Why not plan a getaway? Is it just you two? I'm sure Emma would enjoy spending a few days with your family." I reflected about it and said, "Well, I've considered it. However, Mandy claims Jason Fields is forcing them to maintain good ratings. He's scared that even a minor break may harm their viewership in ways they can't recover from." "Listen," Bill responded, "I know Jason. He's ambitious, yes, but also realistic. Why don't you speak with him? Perhaps he can set up some time for you and Mandy." "I do not know, Bill." I exhaled. "Mandy would go crazy if she found out. I spoke with her boss about this. She does not need to know. Bill suggested that Jason come by the agency tomorrow for a meeting. You could capture him afterwards." "I dislike the thought of combining my personal worries with business," I admitted. "Do not be silly. It's merely a casual discussion following a preliminary meeting." "It's a fantastic opportunity," Bill encouraged. That evening, Mandy arrived home later than usual. She didn't wake me up from my nap on the couch, so I crawled into bed next to her. Sometime in the early morning, I regretted not even getting to say goodnight. Determined to change things, I kept an eye on the conference room. The next day, Jason's meeting concluded. I motioned him over, and he appeared cheerful. "Hello, Elliot. How are my favorite news anchors?" "Husband," he joked. "Hello, Jason. Got a minute?" I asked. "Of course. What is on your mind?" he replied. I took a deep breath and asked you to give Mandy some breathing room. The workload is wearing her down, and it's difficult for both of us. As she indicated, Jason's demeanor changed to one of concern. "Does this mean anything to you?" "She loves it," I said. "But to be honest, I'm the one battling. I barely see her anymore." He relaxed a little, chuckling. "When you married her, you were aware of how demanding her career was, Elliot." "True, but all these extra appearances and late-night meetings are taking up our time," I explained. "All okay. I understand. Maybe we went a little overboard," Jason admitted. "I'll see if we can cut down on the appearances and you can forget about the post-show gatherings. They've actually become obsolete since the last ratings change. Have you seen these? We're far ahead of the competition, and management is delighted with a reassuring pat on the back." He set off for his next meeting. After he left, I checked the ratings myself and discovered that the most recent data were actually released a month ago. If Jason has not scheduled a meeting since then, why was Mandy still getting home late? The concept concerned me, even though I instantly dismissed the possibility that she was concealing something. I knew Mandy loved me and would not jeopardize our marriage. There could be a variety of alternative factors, such as increased fan letters or late-night wind-down time, but those thoughts did not provide much consolation. Later, Bill popped into my office. "Hey, I saw you talking to Jason. Have you received any relief?" I hesitated. "I'm not sure yet, Bill. I guess I won't know until I speak with Mandy." He gave me a perplexed look but didn't pursue any further. "All right. Elliot, please let me know if there is anything I can do." The rest of the day, I went through the motions, but my mind was preoccupied with Jason's comments and Mandy's excuses for her late hours. I pondered approaching her, but I was afraid I'd appear silly if there was a simple reason. Bringing up an affair without cause could have harmed our relationship, but doing nothing seemed weak. By the time I left work to pick up Emma, I was no closer to finding a solution. Fortunately, my little girl's enormous activity kept my mind off things for a while. That night, as I read her asleep, she clung to me, sensing my anxiety. When she fell asleep, tears welled up in my eyes as I imagined how awful divorce would be for her. I stayed up, flicking channels until the news came on. Watching Mandy on film reminded me how much I adored her, and I told myself that she would never betray me. But when she finally walked through the door after midnight, her explanation gave me pause. "Oh, I didn't realize you were still awake," she responded, shocked. "I just wanted to see you," I answered by hugging her. "It is late tonight." She gave me a short kiss. "Yeah, sorry." Jason held us up yet more with one of his post-show appraisals. She went upstairs, and I froze. Jason told me that he hadn't held any reviews in a month. I attempted to reject it, but uncertainty set in. The next day, I asked Bill to join me for lunch, and he accepted, sensing my need for a serious conversation. We drove to a quiet restaurant away from the office. After we placed our order, Bill broke the silence. "Isn't it Mandy?" His remarks struck a chord with me, and I couldn't contain myself. I vented my anxieties and anger. I feel surprisingly exposed. "Man, I always thought you and Mandy had the best marriage." Bill replied, shaking his head. "Yeah, so did I respond quietly. "What are you planning to do?" he inquired, and his query helped me clarify my thinking. "I guess I should go to the station and see for myself if I'm mistaken and everything is well. I will leave discreetly. Mandy will never know." "And if you're correct?" Bill asked gently. I did not have an answer. I'll live with it, but I'll know it's better than living in continual uncertainty. He stared at me thoughtfully. "So what about Emma?" I had already considered that. I said, "I'll call Mrs. Hanley and see if she can keep Emma for a little longer tonight. She's made an offer before, so it should work." After lunch, feeling slightly more at ease, I returned to the workplace. Despite my worry, having a plan felt oddly relaxing. Mrs. Hanley agreed to keep Emma until 11 p.m., and I paid her extra to make the evening enjoyable for Emma with pizza and games. At 10 p.m., I arrived at the station. There would be few people around at that point, probably simply a couple of camera operators and one engineer. When I arrived, however, I realized my error. Jeremiah, the night watchman, was on duty. He recognized me, so getting in was simple, but I had to sign the visiting record, which negated any attempt at secrecy. "Evening, Mr. Foster." "Jeremiah came here to see the news." "Yeah," I responded, attempting to seem nonchalant as I signed in. Jeremiah's empathetic expression took me off guard. "No difficulties tonight, correct?" "No, of course not," I said as I walked toward the studio. "Did he know anything?" As I peered through the blackout curtains, I noticed Mandy walk off stage. But instead of going to her dressing room, she went to the green room, which was usually used for guests. Mandy opened the door, and a light within briefly lit the form of a man before closing it. My heart pounded. If I barged in and everything was fine, Mandy would never forgive me, but if I stayed outdoors, I would never learn the truth. Then I remembered Mandy showing me a little observation glass that could offer me a better view of the room within. I checked the time. It was now 10:45, and I wanted to leave soon to pick up Emma. Looking through the glass, I noticed Mandy involved in a hot hug with a man. I captured the scene on my phone. The faint lighting catches her black lingerie against her skin. As much as I wanted to face her right away, I needed to get Emma. I dashed out of the foyer, nodded at Jeremiah, the security guy, and headed outside. "Sorry about this, Mr. Foster," Jeremiah replied quietly, and I felt a pang of recognition. Was everyone aware but me? I drove swiftly to Mrs. Hanley's house, where she welcomed me in, and I discovered Emma asleep. I covered her in a blanket, thanked Mrs. Hanley, who gave me a concerned look and inquired, "Are you all right, Mr. Foster?" Only then did I realize I had tears on my face. "Oh, it is nothing." "Just something in my eye," I said, taking Emma up to her room at home. I spoke to her in her innocent face, which contrasted with the agony I felt. I sat in the kitchen with a beer, lost in the silence and heavy with the memories of what I'd seen. My mind rushed back to my grandmother's death, a recollection heightened by quiet. Mandy finally came in at 1 a.m., turned on the light, and noticed me sitting there. "Elliot, what are you doing?" she inquired, seeming surprised. "I've been waiting for you," I said evenly. "Jeremiah mentioned you stopped by the studio." She continued to look around. "Is everything fine with Emma?" "She's fine. Mrs. Hanley kept her for me, and she is sleeping upstairs," I responded. She appeared bewildered. "Why didn't you stop by the station and come to my office?" I straightened myself, aware of the gravity of what I was going to say. "I saw you tonight, Mandy. I saw you enter the green room with Paul Michaels." My voice wavered. "Oh, that. We just held a quick meeting following the news," she responded nonchalantly. I stared at her. I saw what the meeting was about. "Mandy, I've even seen your new lingerie." I watched her move nervously. "Elliot, I am very sorry." She finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you sorry you did it? Or simply sorry you were caught?" I demanded, my frustration building. She looked down. "I am sorry you found out this way." I felt my heart drop. "Are you leaving me for him?" She sank on her knees and took my hands. "No, honey, it is not like that. This is only a fling. It will end shortly, and things will return to normal." I stared in shock. "You're not going to stop. Are you just going to keep doing this?" I asked, barely believing what she said. "It means nothing. Elliot, just let me have my fun, and I will get back to you." She responded with a contemptuous tone. I stood there, angry. "Do you honestly expect me to be cool with being betrayed?" She rose to her feet, her expression steely and strong. "Elliot, you don't really have any say. I am your husband, Mandy. If you do not stop, I will file for divorce." I hope this helps her understand the enormity of the situation. She gave me a calculating glance. "That's not in your best interests, Elliot. You will lose custody of Emma and the majority of our assets. The court will not be concerned with the incident. They will concentrate on what is best for Emma. And I'll obtain custody. You'll see her on the weekends, perhaps some holidays." I felt helpless. "You're the one who is cheating," I protested. "This is a faultless situation, Elliot. That will be of no concern to the court." "If you don't believe me, go see a lawyer," she stated firmly as she kissed my head and headed upstairs. I sat there feeling angry, sad, and incredulous. The woman I thought I knew said she'd keep betraying me and expected me to just accept it. Finally, I dragged myself into bed, my mind racing till I fell asleep, weary. I awoke early the next morning and went through the processes of getting ready. I recalled all of the strange ideas that had crossed my head. Running away, waking Mandy up, grabbing Emma, and never looking back. But as I watched Emma sleep soundly, I realized I couldn't do something reckless. I had to put her first in the office. I must have looked bad because Bill noticed right immediately. "You okay, Elliot?" When I didn't respond, he closed the door. "What's happening?" I told him everything from last night. Bill sat in startled silence. "She truly wants you to just tolerate this?" he eventually inquired, astonished. "Yes," I responded, feeling defeated. "It's as if she has changed altogether." Bill leaned in and spoke firmly. "You have to look out for yourself. First things first. Consult a lawyer. Find out what rights you have." "I don't know any lawyers around here," I admitted. Bill smiled and continued. "That's where I come in. My college roommate is a lawyer. I will call him." He returned shortly, giving me an appointment time and address for that afternoon. The lawyer heard my story and then explained how things work in a no-fault state. The court does not look into who is at fault. They concentrate on property division and the child's well-being. "So what does this mean for me?" I asked. In short, Mandy will be taken into custody unless you can prove she is unfit. You will have visitation rights with Emma, but she will be her primary guardian. In addition, you will pay child support, even if Mandy makes more, he explained. How about the house? I asked, hoping for a brief reprieve. It is considered joint property. The court normally prefers that the child remain in the home, therefore she will most likely keep it until Emma turns 18. At that point, you can sell it and divide the equity. If Mandy gets a job in another market, I pressed, you may talk about selling the house, but until then, it stays, he said. Defeated. I realized Mandy had known this all along. Driving back, I felt stuck. Bill took one glance at me and understood. I mumbled, this isn't fair. She's the one doing it, but I'm the one stuck. Bill placed his hand on my shoulder. Elliot, don't even joke about doing anything rash. I do not want to testify that you made threats. I get that, I responded, feeling the weight of the situation, but it feels as if she's hanging over me like an anchor. Looking out of the office window, I noticed a billboard promoting Mandy and Paul as Pittsburgh's option for the evening news. I pointed it out to Bill, frustrated. I can't get away from her, even here. He stared at me thoughtfully. How desperate are you to get out of this mess? He asked. Not desperate enough to try anything insane? I spoke rapidly now. No, I'm talking about a different kind of plan, he explained, leaning in closer. We spent the next hour talking about his concept, and while I kept pushing back, wondering if it was even conceivable, the more we discussed, the more I realized I had run out of options. Okay, Bill, I am in. That evening, I felt a mixture of anxiety and determination. I picked up Emma and attempted to concentrate on our time together. I turned off the TV because I did not want to see Mandy and Paul on screen. Surprisingly, Mandy arrived home early and put Emma to bed, reading her stories and smiling like old times when she returned downstairs. I thanked her. She misses you, particularly around nighttime. I said, Mandy replied almost tearfully, and I miss her too. For a brief moment, I thought she was rethinking, but then she dashed my hopes. She remarked, I'm taking a vacation next week. Jason suggested it because our ratings are high. I tried to sound supportive. I will check with my supervisor to see if I can join you. No, Elliot, Paul and I are going. She said plainly, we're tired of sneaking around and want to take a break together. I was speechless. Mrs. Hanley will keep Emma for the entire week, she explained. Simply drop her off and pick her up. Here's where we'll be if you need to reach me. She handed me a paper and kissed my forehead as if I were a child, saying, thank you for handling everything, honey, before going upstairs. I sat there, shivering with rage. This was beyond humiliating. Bill's bizarre scheme appeared to be the only way for me to reclaim my dignity. I left work early on Friday, knowing Mandy would come home to pack for her trip with Paul. I'd asked Mrs. Hanley to keep Emma overnight so she wouldn't witness any fights or stress when Mandy's automobile arrived. I was already waiting in the living room. She came to a stop when she saw me. Elliot, what are you doing here? I am Mike. She's fine, I replied, trying to maintain a steady tone. She is staying with Mrs. Hanley tonight. She appeared bewildered. So why are you here? I wanted to ask you not to leave with Paul, I informed her directly. Her expression changed to annoyance, and she put her hands on her hips. Elliot, I told you I was having an affair with Paul. When we get back, it will be over and everything will return to normal. You just need to be patient. How about our vows? I inquired, my voice raw. We made a vow to each other to leave everyone else behind. She sighed and rolled her eyes. Those promises were from another time. Elliot, nobody believes that garbage anymore. But Mandy, this is infidelity, I said, barely holding my rage in check. You're disrespecting our marriage. If I want to be with Paul, I will, she said coldly. This has nothing to do with you or me. I couldn't believe how she responded. How about your fans? Mandy? What would people think if they knew? She gave a quick, dismissive laugh. Elliot, I don't care what people think. In about a year, I plan to leave the city for a larger market. What others think is no longer relevant to me. Her remarks cut deep, and I understood how much she had changed. I didn't recognize the woman standing in front of me. Stop bothering me, Elliot. Mandy spoke sharply. I have to finish packing or I will be late. If you can't take seeing me with Paul, please leave now. Her tone was icy and heavy-hearted. I nodded, feeling dejected. I apologize, Mandy, I murmured before turning to leave. I went to a neighborhood tavern for a drink to settle my anxieties. Bill stepped in just as I was starting my second beer. Hello, buddy. He greeted me with concern. How did it go? I do not even know Bill. You would have to see it for yourself to comprehend, I responded, feeling a sense of powerlessness. That's exactly what I intend to do, he declared with determination. We drank our beers and drove back to my home. Mandy had left by the time we arrived, so Bill sat down at my computer and typed a few fast keystrokes to bring up the film from the hidden cameras. We watched as Mandy ignored my protests and carried on with her preparations with Paul. What a heartless woman! Bill murmured and shook his head. Then he heard her dismiss her fans and mention leaving town, and his eyes brightened up. We've got her, Elliot. This is far better than we had imagined. Bill copied the recordings to a flash drive before carefully removing the backup copy from the covert camera. He said that he was holding up the drive. This should do it. On the way back to the pub for Bill's car, he demanded that I accompany him home for supper. Ed prepared a large lunch. If you don't show up, she will be disappointed, he urged. So I followed him, finding solace in his hospitality at Bill's place. Ed greeted me warmly, giving me a tender hug full of genuine affection. Although I scarcely recall the lunch, I could sense their anxiety and the way they stared at me. Later, in their den, we opened a bottle of wine. Ed was unable to contain herself any longer. I just don't understand, Mandy. She was always committed, but suddenly she's acting completely different, she exclaimed, obviously disturbed. Success has transformed her, Bill agreed. She believes she can do whatever she wants. Ed looked to Bill with a serious gaze. Please assist Elliot however you can, she spoke aggressively. I don't enjoy taking sides, but this is simply wrong. Mandy crossed the line and Elliot deserves to retain his daughter. Then, with a pointed look at Bill, she said, If you ever get any ideas about stringing with those models at the agency, you'll have to deal with me. Bill and I chuckled, but her remarks were serious. We talked late into the night until I dozed off on their couch. I vaguely recall Ed wrapping me with a blanket, her motherly touch providing me a little sense of calm. The next morning I awoke with sunlight shining through the window and a dry, stale feeling in my mouth. Bill lent me a toothbrush, and Ed had prepared a large meal, which I managed to finish, my appetite recovering slightly after breakfast. Bill gripped my hand. Leave everything to me. Pick up Emma and get out of here for the weekend. I'll keep you posted. He spoke reassuringly. Bill, I don't know what I'd do without you, I said truly, filled with gratitude. He waved it off, saying, That's what friends are for. I took a deep breath and headed home to prepare for one final painful talk. I located Paul and Molly Michael's phone number in our address book and called Molly. Hello, Molly. This is Elliot Foster, Mandy's husband. Could I come over and talk? I asked, hoping she wouldn't notice the stress in my voice. Hello, Elliot. Sure, come on over, she said hesitantly, as if she was wondering why I wanted to talk to her while driving. I considered how to tell her. It's never easy to share something like this, especially with someone you hardly know. But Molly had a right to know. When I arrived, she welcomed me and offered me a drink. I said, Just water with ice, please. My throat is dry with nerves. She gave me a glass, and I took a steady sip. Molly, do you know where Paul is? I began to speak gently. Of course. He's been attending a TV convention all week. Why? She asked. Her voice was filled with concern. I'm sorry, Molly, But Paul is not at the convention. He's with Mandy. They're having an affair down by the coast. I explained, attempting to break the news gently. Molly's face became pallid. No, that cannot be. He loves me. Mandy and I were like sisters. She would never do this to me, she said softly, her voice shaking. I nodded, acknowledging her shock and anguish and confirming what I was saying. When I showed her the video footage, her face turned red and she started crying. I reached over and placed a hand on her shoulder, hoping to provide some comfort. I'm very sorry, Molly. She suddenly looked up, enraged. That woman, if you had kept her under control. She paused in mid-sentence when she noticed my astonished countenance. Oh, Elliot, I am sad you have also lost your wife, haven't you? Her words brought back memories of my own pain, and tears welled up in my eyes. We sat together for a brief, shattered moment of consolation. Finally, she inquired, What are you going to do now? I detailed my predicament, including the custody of Emma. Molly, who didn't have children, understood the difficulty of my situation. I never thought Mandy could be so heartless, she replied, shaking her head. I'm planning to file for divorce, but I want to be sure I don't lose Emma. I stated that it is best not to know all of the specifics. Are you doing anything illegal? She inquired, her tone apprehensive. No, but if I succeed, Mandy and Paul will regret their actions. I replied with a feeble smile to soothe her. How about you? Will you be able to rebuild with Paul following this? I asked gently. Her expression hardened as she realized what they had been doing for who knows how long. I can't stay with him. Unless you have any other suggestions, I may utilize your counsel. I gave her my lawyer's contact information. Call him on Monday and tell him we're on the same page. I explained that before I went, I asked her for a favor. Molly, please do not tell anyone about this until you hear from me. It might endanger my chances of retaining Emma. Molly looked me straight in the eyes and nodded gravely. You've got my word, Elliot. I will not say anything. After thanking her, I went to Mrs. Hanley's to fetch Emma up. She met me at the entrance and jumped joyfully into my arms. Have you had fun, honey? I asked, smiling. Oh, yes, Daddy. I ate waffles for breakfast and played with dolls. She replied cheerfully. I thanked Mrs. Hanley and informed her that Emma would not be coming next week. Mrs. Hanley gave me a troubled expression. Is everything okay, Mr. Foster? I hope so, I said quietly, feeling her warm encouragement as I belted Emma into the car. She looked around and questioned, Where is Mommy? Mommy had to go on a trip, love. So we're going on our own adventure to Grandma and Grandpa's farm. Her eyes shone with enthusiasm. Can we see the ducks and the small piglets? She inquired enthusiastically. Of course, sweetie, I reassured her as we began driving. I pondered leaving a letter for Mandy, but decided against it. Emma rested for the majority of the drive to my parents' farm, which took just over an hour. When we arrived, my parents were waiting, their cheeks lit up as Emma rushed into Grandma's arms. Mom took her to visit the animals while Dad got our baggage and sighed, giving me a worried expression. He poured me a glass of iced tea and we sat at the kitchen table. Okay, kid, what's going on with you and Mandy? He asked. Worry was imprinted into his eyes. Let's go on a walk, Dad, I responded, knowing that I needed to explain everything. As we wandered alongside the fence, I told him the entire story. He listened silently, his expression revealing his shock and disappointment. When I showed him the video from the green room, he gasped and said, I can't believe it. We stood silently for a moment. He then pulled me into a close hug. I'm very sorry, son. I cannot image how much this must hurt. When we returned, my mother had been crying. She hugged me tightly and whispered, No matter what, we are here for you, Elliot. I spent the evening with Emma, knowing they needed to be strong for her. The next day, I went to my parents' church, where I found consolation in the familiar lyrics and ancient hymns. That evening, when Bill called, I understood how fortunate I was to have his support. "Are you ready, Elliot?" he asked, his tone steady. "Once we begin, there is no turning back." I paused to examine the hazards. "Yes, Bill," I responded, feeling my determination strengthen. "Let us do this." The following day, after we returned from church, Bill called with an update. His voice seemed focused and consistent. I tried to thank him again, but he dismissed it. "Don't mention it. You do the same for me. If everything was reversed." Then his tone changed, becoming more serious. "Okay, Elliot, are you ready to put this plan into action? Remember, there is no turning back." I took a big breath and weighed the hazards, even if everything went flawlessly. I knew I'd be fighting an uphill battle. But Mandy had humiliated me, so I felt I had no alternative. "Yes, Bill," I finally said. "Let's get started." Bill's voice softened slightly. "I can tell you're concerned. Ed thinks you're doing the right thing," he continued with encouragement. "Do you have access to a computer?" I chuckled, enjoying the light tone. I said, "Yes, Bill, I'm not living in the 1800s. "Good. I'll contact you tomorrow with further information," he continued, and I could detect a tiny smirk in his voice. "Why not just email me the link?" I inquired, puzzled by his approach. "I'd like to keep this private. Please wait for my call." "Okay," he insisted. Bill called early Monday morning to give me instructions. "When you have some time alone, go to YouTube and type CTR Special into the search bar, watch it, and let me know what you think." My parents had taken him for a walk, so I took advantage of the opportunity, grabbed my laptop, and entered some search phrases among the results. One video titled Katie. Our co-host Mandy White's particular philosophy on love and marriage drew my attention. I clicked, and as the familiar theme music for Mandy's show played, a voice-over began. Popular KCRW News co-host Mandy White recently expressed her ideas on marriage and fidelity in an honest interview. The narrator proclaimed, and I felt my pulse pound as the video cut to Mandy, filmed in our own home, making disparaging remarks about marital vows. The narrator reappeared, asking, "What are your thoughts on marriage, Mandy?" The video cut to her claiming that vows are antiquated. Nobody truly believes that garbage anymore. I understood this footage was a creative mashup of things Mandy had told me privately. Her disdainful attitude toward her admirers and small-town life was obvious. The video continues with Mandy adding, "If I want to be with Paul Michaels, I will." That's what I desire. Finally, the screen changed to display footage of Mandy and Paul from the green room. Their intimacy is evident. The voiceover ended with a scary line. Now, fans are questioning who the actual Mandy White is. The classic Qatar news theme played, but this time it showed an empty newsroom gradually fading out, leaving me feeling a strange mix of triumph and grief. I leaned back and called Bill's number. "Well," he replied, almost giddy. "My God, Bill, you are a genius. This will end your career," I replied, still shocked. "Not terrible. I'm quite proud of it," he said enthusiastically. For a brief period, I felt a sense of remorse. "Are we going too far?" Bill's tone became serious. "Elliot, did she tell you all those things or not?" "Yes, but—" "No buts," he interrupted. "Mandy transformed into a selfish monster, and the world deserves to know. Elliot, you're a decent guy. If you do not do this, you will not be the one to suffer. It will be Emma. Do you truly want Mandy as a role model?" I exhaled, allowing the facts to settle in. "You're correct, Bill. There is no alternative here." "So what happens next?" I asked. "Should we start emailing the video?" "There's no necessity." Bill assured me that this will spread on its own. "I'll send out a few chatterboxes, and it'll quickly grow viral. Just sit tight for the next week." I tried to take my mind off things, spending time with Emma on my parents' property. She learned all about farm duties and even assisted my mother with cooking, enjoying every minute. Every day, Bill called with an update. By Tuesday, he was laughing as he informed me that Ed had overheard people talking about the video at work. By Wednesday, the Kiwanis Club was discussing it, and by Thursday, a local columnist had featured it in the newspaper. Everyone was wondering about Mandy and Paul. When Bill called on Thursday afternoon, he couldn't contain his joy. The entire station is in terror. Elliot. They're getting calls from different news organizations and no one understands how to handle it. Even Mandy's supervisor, Jason Fields, is unavailable on vacation. On Friday, Bill linked me to a blog post on Gawker.com that discussed the controversy surrounding the video. The story links to a video speculating on major shakeups at Qatar. That morning, I spoke with my attorney about starting the divorce process and arranged for Mandy to be served at the posh resort in Santa Ana, where she and Paul were staying. I even called Paul's wife, Molly, and asked whether she wanted him served at the same time. "No," she said, her voice firm. "I'll handle it myself when he returns." Other local TV stations saw an opportunity in Kate's fragility, so Bill discreetly alerted a producer at Pittsburgh's second-largest station about my divorce file, which was hot news for them. The station validated my filing and even determined where Mandy would be served. They went all in, sending a camera crew and a lead reporter to Santa Ana on Saturday. On Saturday morning, Bill called with further information. Jason Fields has cut his vacation short. He is hurrying back, and no one can reach Mandy or Paul. Kate is in a state of disarray. That evening, the tale aired as the lead section on the competitor's channel. A slow news day. Except for this. The broadcast began with an image of Mandy and Paul on the billboard, which was visible from my office window for several days. Pittsburgh watchers have been wondering where Kate, Mandy White, and Paul Michaels are. The announcer declared, "We found them in Santa Ana," before switching to footage of their reporter, Mary Brooks, marching down the beach toward Mandy and Paul, who were sunbathing and unaware of her approach as Mary closed in. She called out Mandy White and Paul Michaels. "Can you address the rumors about your relationship?" Mandy's eyes widened, and she rushed to cover herself with a towel while Paul clumsily sought for his as well. Mary's voice became sharper as she proceeded. "What are your thoughts on the viral video?" "What video?" Mandy stammered, confused. "The one when you referred to Pittsburgh viewers as rednecks and revealed you came here to have an affair with Paul Michaels," Mary replied calmly. Mandy struggled to find words, and Paul attempted to interfere, but just then a man in a suit moved forward. "Are you Mandy White?" he asked. Mandy answered instinctively. "Yes, that is me." The man handed her the envelope. "Miss White, you have been served. Furthermore, your husband wants you to know that the locks on your house have been changed, and you are no longer welcome. There." Mandy's face grew pale, and in a fit of wrath, she screamed, "That son of a bitch!" But Paul drew her away, bringing her toward the resort as cameras focused on her oil-splattered, frantic escape. Back in the studio, the anchor appeared, describing the story involving Mandy White and Paul Michaels, who were discovered in Santa Ana and now face both professional and personal consequences. White's spouse has filed for divorce and changed the locks to their home. We tried to reach him for comment, but were unable. They hadn't reached me since I was still on the farm, enjoying a quiet evening with Emma and my parents. Bill later told me that Mandy returned to our house with Paul, dismissing the lock-changing threat as a farce, only to discover that her key did not work. A video crew caught her desperate attempts to enter. Meanwhile, Molly served Paul with divorce papers at his home, which was caught on camera. When Paul called to explain himself on Sunday, Jason was enraged and returned to the station. Jason directed them both to report to the studio immediately. They attempted to sneak in through the back entrance, but were unable to dodge the opposing network's news van stationed outside, inside. Jason ripped at them in front of the whole staff. Mandy, enraged, exclaimed, "You can't do this." "We have contracts." Jason gave her a cold look. "Your contracts have a morals clause that requires you to follow particular norms of behavior. which you broke. What we do in private is no one's business, Mandy shot back. Jason, a devout Catholic, stared her straight in the eye. Mandy, at church today, the priest discussed the sanctity of marriage and the immorality of infidelity. He didn't use your name, but everybody knew who he was talking about. Paul scoffed. Nobody cares about us. Oh, they do, Jason replied sarcastically, pulling back the curtain to reveal the billboard, which had been defaced with the words. Pittsburgh's pick for the 6-hour news is a strumpet. Mandy let out a gasp as Jason continued. Your actions have disgraced the station. You've gone off air, effective immediately. Have you ever watched the original Frankenstein? He inquired as they stood in stunned silence. So you're the monster, and Pittsburgh is the angry mob. If I were you, I would leave town. On Sunday evening, I cautiously drove back to Pittsburgh, listening to the radio for reports of their dismissal. By the time I arrived home, the media frenzy had subsided. The following morning, a political scandal dominated the headlines, pushing Mandy and Paul's story to the back pages. When I brought Emma to Mrs. Hanley's, she greeted us warmly. I'm so sorry to hear about everything, Mr. Foster. I hope you and Emma are doing well, she said kindly. Though she made no mention of Mandy at work, most people were polite but distant, offering me sympathetic looks but avoiding direct conversation. However, Bill greeted me with a firm hug. You are a genius, I told him. This campaign was a complete success. We couldn't have asked for a better result, Bill admitted, though he added that we can't ever discuss what we did well. I replied, Mandy will figure out who was behind it all, but I don't want you caught in the middle. Later that week, my lawyer called with some unexpected news. Mandy had decided not to contest her divorce. Why would she back down? I inquired, surprised. She said she would fight me. Her attorney talked her out of it. He explained that she wanted to counter Sue's invasion of privacy. However, the case would be complicated. And she's not particularly popular right now. Emma, Mandy is unemployed and has no solid prospects, so the judge will rule in your favor. What about her threat to take Emma? I pressed. He replied, she is leaving town, and we will give you full custody. She only wants to retrieve her belongings and speak with you before she leaves. You are free to speak once she has signed the papers. I agreed to meet her at the end of this week. I had gotten almost everything I wanted, but the reality was bittersweet. What I really wanted was for my life to return to normal after everything that had happened. I still had my daughter, and I knew that was what was most important. The following night, I joined Bill and Ed for a celebratory dinner. I brought champagne to congratulate them, and Emma joined us, nodding asleep in one of their guest rooms, while we chatted and lifted our glasses. Ed grinned pleasantly. Are you both? She remarked. Elliot, I thought your plan was nuts and could backfire. But you. She lifted her glass to me. You fought for your tiny girl? And you? She gazed at her spouse. You were certain that you could make it work, so thank you both for sticking with each other against the odds. Cheers. Bill and I clinked glasses with Ed, feeling the relaxation hit in before we finished. I felt compelled to check on Molly Michaels, Paul's wife. She'd been through so much, and I couldn't help but feel awful for drawing her into this mess. Paul was the true culprit, but Molly had not expected this betrayal. I called her, and she invited me to lunch, assuring me that she harbored no grudges. We met in a quiet little cafe, and when we ordered, I asked how she was doing. Elliot stated that she was not feeling well. One day I'm happily married to a TV host, and the next I'm divorcing a man who publicly humiliates me. I know Molly. It resembles a horrible soap opera. I spoke sympathetically. She inquired about my condition, and I disclosed the outcome of my divorce filing. Good. She spoke with an angry expression in her eyes. Mandy received what she deserved. What about Paul? I asked. That coward skipped town, she said, her voice harsh. He instructed his lawyer to give me whatever I wanted. I'm not sure where he is, and frankly, I don't care. Except, I still wake up reaching for him. It's difficult to break these behaviors. Are you doing okay financially? I expressed my worry. Yes and no. He left me with a house, but it is too huge and has a large mortgage. Paul must pay alimony, but I cannot count on it, she admitted. I believe I'll move in with my folks, find work, and start over. I felt bad for her. Molly was a sweet woman who deserved none of this. I asked her to stay in touch, and we agreed to keep each other updated. The last phase was Mandy's visit to reclaim her possessions. Though my fury had subsided, I wasn't looking forward to it. Still, I wanted to show her some courtesy by having Emma welcome her. When Mandy emerged from her rental SUV, she frowned at first, but softened when Emma raced into her arms. Mandy's eyes welled up with tears as she hugged her daughter tight and whispered, "Thank you." They played together for a while, and even though the visit was meant to be brief, I decided to give them as much time as they required. Emma showed Mandy her toys and talked constantly about her week, so Mandy suggested she go play in her room. "I'll get up in a minute, sweetheart. I just need to talk to Daddy first," she explained. When Emma left, Mandy's demeanor changed and her look hardened. So he took advantage of our private discussions to ruin my life and make me a laughingstock. How could you do that, Elliot? I took a deep breath, not wanting to rekindle the conflict. "Mandy, I do not want to fight anymore. Neither of us will win if we do." She replied, "That's easy for you to say. You cost me my career, family, and future, all to safeguard your pride." "Mandy," I responded steadily, "think about it. None of this would have happened if you had not been so selfish. You brought this upon yourself." She seemed to want to dispute, but then Emma called from upstairs asking when she'd get up. Mandy seemed torn, looking between me and the stairs. After a minute, she proceeded to help Emma collect her belongings. She kept Emma close, and the two of them talked and laughed. Hearing their voices made me feel sad. This was the final time they'd share these moments in our home. Mandy finally came downstairs, baggage in hand, while Emma trailed behind. She knelt down and held our daughter close. "Mommy needs to depart, dear," she spoke sweetly. "I will be living far away, therefore I will not see you every day. But I'll come whenever I can, and we can talk on the phone and see each other on video." Emma screamed, embracing her mother firmly and asking her not to leave. Mandy raised her, held her close, and whispered quietly, "It's okay, my love. I will see you soon, and we will have a wonderful time." She came over to me, still carrying Emma. "Now be good to Daddy, okay? I really love you. Do not forget that." With that, she let Emma go, gathered up her suitcases, and headed to the door, tears flowing down her cheeks. She waved quickly, got into her car, and drove away without looking back. I hugged Emma as she wailed, tears streaming down my cheeks as well. I was losing my wife, while Emma was losing her mother. After a while, I gently sat her down and attempted to lift her spirits. "Listen," I replied, smiling. "How about we go to the park, watch the ducks, and have some ice cream?" "Oh, yes," she responded eagerly, "and we can feed the ducks with our cones, right?" "Of sure," I replied, happy to find a means to divert her, even if only for a little while. I knew she'd miss her mother, but I was hoping that as a small child she'd adjust fast. I just had to believe that I would be too. The following week presented yet another problem. My supervisor called me into his office late one evening. "You've done an excellent job, Elliot. We appreciate everything you've given to the agency," he said, and I could hear the inevitable but coming. "However, the situation with your wife is impacting our clients. They are interested in your relationship with Mandy, which has an impact on our relationships. And, well, Qatar is an important media outlet for us." "So you are firing me?" I asked bluntly. "No. Absolutely not. But we believe it is best for you to look for work elsewhere," he said, attempting to seem conciliatory. "How much time have I asked plainly. "Take as much as you need, and you'll receive a wonderful letter of recommendation." It wasn't fair, but I knew better than to burn bridges. I shook his hand, thanked him, and headed to Bill's office. "What's up, buddy?" he asked. "I was just fired," I replied calmly. "The agency believes it is better if I move on." "This is absurd," he exclaimed, standing up. "I am going to tell them what I think." I placed a hand on his shoulder and guided him back to his chair. "Bill, you have already done enough for me. Do not jeopardize your status here." He was unhappy, but he gradually calmed down. We ended the talk with plans for me and Emma to meet for dinner on Saturday. As I revised my resume, I realized the unpleasant reality. Mandy and Paul's affair had left its imprint on me in Pittsburgh. Everyone liked me, but nobody wanted to hire me. It was time to expand my search. In the end, I returned to my previous agency in Columbia, where the scandal had not followed me, and my big city knowledge was regarded as an asset. I had to sell our Pittsburgh home, but despite a strong market, the proceeds barely covered what was owing, which had to be split with Mandy. Mandy did not vanish from our life totally. She started calling him weekly and eventually moved on to video calls. Face-to-face encounters were out of the question after she moved to Santa Ana, California. The incident had a long-term impact on her career, even beyond the Southeast, and she eventually obtained a job teaching journalism at a community college. After reuniting with my agency in Columbia, I needed a place to stay. The agency introduced me to Molly Michaels, a real estate agent. We caught up as she showed me houses, and she explained that she relocated to Columbia when Paul left to pursue a new career in real estate. She even promised to help him find a good preschool, as well as other children's activities. I found Molly's down-to-earth personality refreshing, in stark contrast to the high-maintenance personalities I had grown accustomed to. We had a lengthy talk, and I invited her to dinner to further discuss options. Eventually, I decided on a reasonably priced property that Molly had advised as a place she would want to live herself. Her honesty and sincerity drew me in, and we grew closer. Molly and I married shortly afterward. Moving into that house together alleviated my anxieties about Emma adjusting, as she and Molly soon bonded. Before I knew it, she was calling her Molly Mom, which quickly became simply Mom. That summer, we took Emma to Los Angeles to see Mandy. Molly proposed we go on the trip, which encouraged me more than I expected. Her confidence and maturity reassured me that our family was doing well. When we got at John Wayne Airport, Mandy was already there. Despite our video chats, I almost didn't recognize her in person due to her shorter haircut and casual attire. Emma. Suddenly, she clutched to Molly, who gently persuaded her to visit Mandy. Emma walked nervously toward her mother before sprinting to hug her passionately, while Mandy wiped away tears of excitement. She turned to face Molly and me. "Thank you," she muttered. We all proceeded to the baggage claim together, and when Emma became distracted by a retail display, Mandy used the chance to apologize. "I've done a lot of thinking, Elliot," she added gently. "I went to therapy and realized how much my ambition had altered me. I hurt you both, and I hope you don't hate me because of it." Molly and I exchanged glances before walking up to hug Mandy, experiencing a sense of relief from long-held pain. After our vacation, I called Bill, feeling motivated. "Bill, you took a chance on me once. How about we do it again?" He sounded puzzled. "What do you mean? Quit your work. Move down here and we'll build an agency together. Corbin and Foster," I proposed, barely controlling my excitement. There was a delay before he replied, "Only if it's named Foster and Corbin." We chuckled and quickly started making arrangements. Bill and Ed went to Columbia with Molly and assisted them in finding a neighboring home. Not long after, we got our first major client, who expressed interest after hearing our pitch. "I want to stand out. Do you believe you could handle a viral campaign?" he asked. Bill and I exchanged a no one glimpse. We are confident in our smiles. "Yes," I responded, with a newfound sense of purpose. "We can manage anything." Here's the next story. Claire and I met in college where we were both studying marketing. We hit it off right away, sharing a passion for indie music and vintage movies, and spending our weekends shopping secondhand stores and attending rare film screenings. After graduation, we married in a little ceremony that was ideal for us. Understated and personal, surrounded by our closest friends and family. We fell into a comfortable routine after moving into a modest home in a quiet area. We adopted a rescue puppy, Marley, and both found jobs in our fields. Claire secured a job at a downtown marketing agency, which she was thrilled about given the firm's repute and her enthusiasm for the field. I obtained work at a small advertising agency, and for a while, everything seemed to be going as planned. Our marriage was robust, based on mutual respect, common interests, and a profound love for one another. We stood by each other through job, stress, family, drama, and the regular ups and downs of life. We discussed starting a family eventually and adding another chapter to our lives together. Then, around 7:30 p.m. on Thursday, my phone buzzed with a Facebook notification from an unfamiliar name. Swiping it open, I discovered a note from Clara's co-worker, Alex. The message was straightforward, with an attached image that loaded slowly on my phone. Clara sat too near to a man in a pub. Their hands were linked, and they appeared to be considerably more than friendly. Alex's message was concise. "I felt you should know what has been going on at work." I stared at the photograph for what seemed like hours. Clara and I had our issues, yes, but cheating? That was a line I never imagined we'd cross. Yet here it was. Indisputable proof, staring back at me from my phone screen. I chose not to face Clara immediately away. I needed time to reflect, plan, and observe. So I waited as normally as possible. While inside, I had a slew of feelings I couldn't fully understand. My heart raced with unanswered questions, and my mind strained to make sense of everything. For the next week or two, I played the oblivious husband. Clara appeared to be as affectionate and present as ever, adding to the bizarre nature of the event. Every morning she would kiss me goodbye and leave for work, leaving me to think about the reality of our life together. Every evening she returned home with a grin, completely ignorant of the turmoil that was developing within of me. During this period, I did some digging on my own. I contacted Alex, requesting additional information. He was hesitant at first, but soon revealed that the man in the photo was Mark, a recent hire at the firm noted for his charm and apparent lack of limits. According to Alex, Clara and Mark had grown closer over the last few months, with their friendship blossoming into something more, at least from what he could see. I thanked Alex for his candor, even if each new piece of information seemed like additional burden on my chest. I didn't understand why Clara would do this. I thought we had always been open with each other. The betrayal was deeply felt not only because of the infidelity, but also because of the breakdown of trust. The announcement of a company-wide meeting at Clara's firm proved to be a watershed moment. It was an annual event and partners were invited. Clara mentioned it in passing. I assumed I wouldn't be interested in attending, but this year I had a reason to go. On the day of the meeting, I dressed in my best suit, kissed Clara goodbye, and informed her that I had arranged a surprise day for us. The surprise on her face was obvious, but she smiled, kissed me back, and departed for work. I waited a few hours before heading to the meeting venue. My stomach is in knots. When I arrived, I fit in with the other partners and made small chat, while searching the crowd for Clara and Mark. I eventually spotted them standing too close and laughing too loudly. Everything became more real when they saw each other in person. Halfway through the meeting, there was an opportunity for announcements. I took my chance, going forward calmly. I didn't feel. The room fell silent as I began to talk. My voice is steady. I understand this is odd, but I believe it is important. I began approaching Clara, shocked eyes across the room. I recently found that my wife, Clara, is having an affair with one of her colleagues, Mark. The hush that ensued was tangible. I wanted to address this in front of you all because I believe in transparency and honesty, which appear to be lacking in some areas of our lives. The reactions were mixed. Some looked away uncomfortably, but others remained transfixed. Clara stood still, her face paler. Mark seemed to want the ground to swallow him up. After my declaration, I left without saying anything else, not looking back. Clara returned home later, frantic, teary, and contrite. But the harm had been done. Our chats that night and the following days were filled with her requests for forgiveness and promises to change. However, for me, trust had been irreparably shattered. We chose to divorce, which was both difficult and necessary. The house. We had built a home and envisioned a future together. Everything was now stained with betrayal. Finally, I recognized that this was more than simply infidelity. It was about respect, trust, and the decisions we made. I opted to stand up for myself, to confront the truth, even if it would have been easier to turn away. And despite the uncertainty of the road ahead, I was confident that I would make my way through it step by step. Rebuilding my life on my own terms. Update. It's been half a year since the divorce was finalized, and life has taken on a new pace. The initial flood of emotions has subsided, leaving behind a sense of serenity and remarkable clarity. I moved into a smaller apartment that feels more like me than our old house did after discovery. I've poured myself into job and activities that I had put aside throughout my marriage. Life is moving along, and so am I. However, one component of the divorce agreement has been a source of frustration for me: alimony. As things stand, I'm paying Clara a large sum each month. At the time, the decision felt like yet another setback in a string of failures. Despite her infidelity, the judge ruled that my higher salary deserved alimony payments. It was a difficult pill to swallow. I felt punished, despite the fact that I was the one who was harmed. I've done some research and spoken with my lawyer about the problem. It turns out that there could be a silver lining. The legal system is complex, and decisions can be influenced by the judge's interpretation of the law and the facts of the case. My lawyer stated that if we can present our case to a new court, highlighting the circumstances of the divorce and my financial status, the alimony may be decreased or perhaps canceled. This news has given me a sense of hope. Not because I would deny Claire support if she actually needed it, but because the current situation feels like a reminder of the betrayal, a financial shackle for the past. I'm trying hard to let go of the thought that I might be able to break free from this final tie, which is both liberating and motivating. So I started the process. We are collecting evidence and creating paperwork, and I am learning a lot about patience and the legal system. It is a gradual process with no assurances, but I am ready to take the risk if it means turning over a new leaf in every sense. Then I owe it to myself to try and ponder on everything. I know that while the past is unchangeable, I can still shape the future. The prospective legal battle is about more than simply money. It's about finding justice for myself, reconciling with my past, and setting the framework for the life I want to live. Regardless of the outcome, I'm learning to advocate for myself in ways I never expected. Life after divorce is teaching me a lot about endurance, hope, and the opportunity of a fresh start. Update 2. Something unexpected occurred in the swirl of life after divorce, between the legal fights and the search for inner serenity. I met somebody. I won't mention names here, but to say she's excellent would be an understatement. We met because we both enjoyed cycling. One weekend, a local bicycling group scheduled a ride into the countryside, and it seemed that fate chose to play a role. She had an infectious energy, a laugh that filled the air, and a soul that appeared to dance with life. Our chats went well, and there was an evident connection that none of us could deny. She is remarkably understanding of my past, never demanding more than I am willing to discuss, and always available to listen when I need to speak. She has instilled a new feeling of fun and adventure in my life, urging me to try new things, open up, and live in the moment with her. I've rediscovered aspects of myself that I believed were lost in the aftermath of my former marriage. Yes, the court battle over alimony ended with a new judge and a more favorable hearing. My financial commitments were substantially decreased. It felt like the end of the chapter, allowing me to fully embrace this new beginning. Her and I have been dating for a few months, and each day feels like a new discovery. We encourage one another's dreams, push each other to improve, and find joy in the simplest moments. She isn't just my girlfriend. She's my companion on this journey called life. I never expected to be where I am now, 1 year after my world was turned upside down. But life has a funny way of giving us exactly what we need. Just when we needed it. She is proof of that. Throughout the tumult, she has been my rock. She's shown me that happiness isn't only achievable after heartbreak. It may be even more profound. So here I am, moving forth. I'm grateful for the past, since it has led me to where I am now. The future looks promising, and for the first time in a long time, I'm looking forward to seeing where this trip takes us. No fluff speech this time, gentlemen. They say love is dead, but it must be worse at this stage. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened. Take care.